It's a talk back button. And so then she realized that she wasn't represented on TV, and she felt a bit down about it. And that was how Rebecca sort of got into the love of TV. And she was really wanting to explore a career in TV. Now, I met Rebecca when we had our children. There's a picture here of our various pictures of our children. She had Buster and I had Eva. We were both living in London, in a one-bedroom flat, as you do in the centre of London. And we met as just new mums. I noticed that she was deaf. She never made any note about it. It's not something she talked about much. Our kids became best friends, Buster and Eva, and then she got pregnant and I got pregnant again with the second child. So Hetty and Fred were born. We hung out. Our kids played at Coram Fields. Do you know Coram Fields around the corner from Great Ormond Street? We spent so long there. We played more. Then at Fred's 6 weeks check, I get a very tentative diagnosis of a severe visual impairment, which really blew me away. I noticed Fred had wobbly eyes, which now I know is nystagmus. And this, a quick trip to Great Ormond Street and Moorfields quickly diagnosed Fred as being severely sight impaired. And one of the first person I bumped into was Rebecca. I was in balls of tears, as you do, if you've had that journey. I was heartbroken. I'd worked with disabled kids before, so I shouldn't be scared, but I was heartbroken. I'll say this, I even said to my friend, it's a tragedy. And I said, I've had a tragedy in my life. My dad died when I was 18. That's my tragedy. I don't deserve another one. And it's really hard for me to remember that because Fred is no tragedy, of course. And Rebecca just gave me a big hug and she looked at me and said, do you know what? She said, I can't see either. And I was like, what? You're joking? She says, no, I have ushers. I'm severely sight impaired. I've got tunnel vision. And I never knew. I said, but you can't be sight impaired. You're my best mate. You're a journalist. You work at the BBC. You're this, you're that. And that moment, I realized all my biases that I didn't even know I had, all my unconscious biases around disability came out. And then I looked at Rebecca and realized actually it's going to be all right, because she was a brilliant friend, smashing life, who was deaf and blind. And for me, that journey started there. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, we don't all start at the same place. And the importance of having Rebecca as a friend and having Rebecca as a godmother to Fred is so important, because she is positively representing everything that's brilliant about being Rebecca. And that happens to include being deaf and being visually impaired. So I just wanted to share that story because I think unconscious bias is something we come across all the time as parents and of children, and we just don't realise it. Has anybody got any questions before I head on to mix-ups? No, we can explore unconscious bias later if we want. It's a really interesting area. Right, so fast forward again, we all moved out of London because you can't live in London unless you're a millionaire and want more than one bedroom. Rebecca was on Rebecca had finally accepted her sort of visual impairment. She got a cane, but she wanted a guide dog, so she was on the list for a guide dog. And I was in mad search for toys that represented disability, because I knew play is dead important to kids. And they should have toys that represent them, because that's how you build your self-esteem and your confidence and your identity. So Rebecca was looking for hers and I was looking for mine, and we come across nothing. So I've got pictures here of old men in wheelchairs, old men using a guide dog, nurses' outfits, grey wheelchairs with a person with a head bandage on. So we looked at all these toys and we thought, what's missing? These are all stereotypes in the toy box. So that what's missing was colour, what's missing is fun, creativity, empowerment. And what do these boring images of these toys teach children about disability? Well, not very much, I don't think, that it's a stereotype. So we set about doing something. She was living in Norwich at that time, and I'm still living in York now. So we set about trying to do something about it. And we set up a community interest company called Toy Like Me. And we did that by showing, not telling. So there's a picture here that's got lots of Playmobil characters that I like to say, pimped, changed them. So we've got a princess here with a black guide dog. We've got a cowboy with a white cane. We've got a princess with an eye patch. We've got a beautiful Playmobil figure that's got fairy wings on the back of a wheelchair, and an Aladdin figure with a guide dog. So we tried to show people through the power of Facebook what toys could be like. And we asked the toy industry, why aren't there toys like this? Because this is what we both needed. So we set up Toy Like Me Community Interest Company, and we went quite viral quite quickly at the time, and we started to get some traction and we've got a little bit of funding. And we're still a community interest company, and we create projects that start conversations around disability. We want better for disabled children in toys and the media. So I've been to many toy fairs, and we bang on toy makers' doors to say, you must do better. It's not good. I know Barbie Mattel has done a lot in the last few years, so things have got better, which I'm really pleased to hear. But even the Barbies, I don't think the Barbies have got any stories about them. They've got some brilliant Barbies with multiple disabilities, but not many stories. And we try and educate. So Toy Like Me does some workshops and resources. So we've done lots of projects. We've worked with doll companies, Lottie, to develop dolls with hearing aids. We've done a few deaf projects. We do some storytelling projects. There's a picture of Teddy here with our sensory story. But it still wasn't enough, because the toy companies we worked with still created stereotypes. We worked with Playmobil, or Rebecca worked very closely with them for a few months, and they came back with a really stereotypical Playmobil figure with an armband with wrong braille on it, with dark glasses. And we were like, that's not what we were after. So we realized we had to probably do something ourselves. And the real reason why we thought representation was important for children is for two main things. There's a picture here of a child with a doll on her back with a cochlear implant, and a picture of, she has a cochlear implant herself. So why we think representation matters is both it grows the positive self-esteem of your children, seeing images, toys of people like them, but equally important, it grows the open minds of their non-disabled friends and family, because it's a two-way thing. You can't have one without the other, and they feed off each other positively. But it still wasn't enough. We thought we've got a problem, and Rebecca wanted to solve this problem, so she wanted to make a show and have toys and have books. But how can she tell these stories differently? Well, we spent a lot of years developing Mix-Mups. Mix-Mups is a stop frame animation that's been commissioned by Milkshake. It's been 7 years in the making. We've done a lot of work with children to create the characters. And I wanted to take you through some of the stories behind Mix-Mups, if that's okay. A show of hands, how many people have seen Mix-Mups? Or you can yell or do what you want. Fern,
yes, I have.
You better have. Well, if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you go to My5, whack the audio description on, because it's brilliant, and watch this. I think there's about 20 odd episodes available to watch on My5. So time to meet the Mix-Mups. Here we go. These are three little friends who live in a helter-skelter house. We've got Giggle, Spin, and Pockets. Giggle is a wheelchair user, Pockets is partially sighted, and Spin is a boisterous young rabbit. Mix-Mups is play-led. I was their play consultant, so we spent a lot of time working with children in creating props. So I took you'll see here on the PowerPoint, there's a mock-up of the box. We wanted to learn how children played. Play theory informed the whole of Mix-Mups. You can see here mixing. That's a schematic play theory of mixing. Kids love doing it. So there's lots of play theory that drives Mix-Mups, because we didn't want it to be a show about disability. Disability is the most important part of the show, but we didn't want it to be about it. So Mixed Mops is informed by play theory. And I don't know, people know a little bit about play theory. I like to say play is the spice of life. So we've all got different play styles and personalities. The 5 big ones can be social play, physical play, intellectual play, creative play, and emotional play. So you'll see as we go through Mixed Mops, all of the characters are informed by their play personality. We did this because we did not want to start with the character. So we've got a picture of Pockets here using her cane, and Yapette is by her side. It's on the beeping egg hunt, which is a fantastic episode, and it's based on one of our egg hunts that we've done in York. So to change the disability focus, we focused on the characters having play personalities. So Pockets the bear is neat and tidy. She's very empathetic and reflective. She's quite an introvert. She likes collecting things. She likes keeping things in her pockets. She's partially sighted, and she has a Yapette, the guide dog, who takes her job very seriously. And she's lots of fun. Yapette has a red nose and a stripy and spotty harness. That's the first character. So we've got Giggle the cat. Giggle, her play personality is really creative, and she's very imaginative. She's an extrovert who loves crafting, and she's a wheelchair user. It's really important to say that Giggle's character, we were not struggling, but we wanted there to be some real authenticity around the characters, because we wanted the representation to be right. I should have said Pockets' visual impairment is based on Rebecca's tunnel vision. So when we're looking at the way Pockets moves or the way Pockets sees things, Rebecca can be right on it and say, I wouldn't do things like that, because the vision impairment is based on Rebecca's RP, tunnel vision. Same with Giggle. So Giggle's character has got a curvature of the spine, and we had junior consultants as part of our development plan, and 3 of them were wheelchair users, and all 3 of them said, we want to see this character come out of their wheelchair, because we're so fed up of people saying, do you sleep in your wheelchair? Do you eat in your wheelchair? Do you go to the loo in the wheelchair? So it was really important for us to see Giggle transfer. And if you watch any of the episodes, you'll see her. Also, it's important for her to have the same disability as one person, because we realize we can't represent all of disability, but we can do a little bit right. So Giggle's represented on this one boy who has curvature of the spine, who we took videos of, and who's one of our junior consultants. So this is his reality. And that's the thing about representation. You can't represent everybody, but if you do one thing right, then I think you're going a long way to getting it right. So Giggle has an assistant's pet, roller guinea. Now everybody wants a roller guinea. If we get to bring out toys, there's going to be a world shortage of roller guineas. He's a lively, inquisitive, and zoomy assistant, and that everyone wishes they owned. And so Giggle has got stripes as well. She's yellow and orangey stripes. So Spin the rabbit. Spin is a non-disabled character. He's the youngest of the bunch. He's a red rabbit with big red ears. He's got a picture of him flat out after winning the race on the zigzag race. He's an extrovert, and his play style is very physical play. He's very clumsy and playful. We like to say, if you imagine, if you gave each character a box and they just played with it, Spin would get inside it, he would smash it all up, he would have such a good time being in it and breaking it. Pockets would probably make a nice little shelving unit for her stone collection, and Giggle would probably make some wonderful wheelchair fancy dress for it. So that's their 3 different play styles. What we noticed, right, when we were as soon as we finished a couple of the episodes, we were very keen, and we made sure that Milkshake agreed to audio describe all 52 episodes that were commissioned. It was a revelation to me that only the large broadcasters have a commitment to maybe, is it 20% audio describe? And I think that's appalling. Imagine halfway through your favorite sitcom and it stops being audio described. It's appalling. So we had that commitment from Mixed Mops. to audio describe all of them. But we realized very early on that we couldn't explain in the 9 minutes that's there all of the nuances. So we created this intro, which is a 6-minute video, and I'm going to try and play it, that describes the mix-em-ups in the children's voices. Let me see if it plays. Can you hear that?
Audio described introduction to the mix-em-ups.
Yeah.
Mix-em-ups. I'm Pockets the Bear. I have curly blue hair, a dark brown face, a curly fringe, and ears shaped like circles. I wear big red glasses with yellow stars on the corners. I have 3 red pockets on my body. I'm partially sighted, which means I can't see as much as others. I like to use my paws to touch things as well as look with my eyes. I have a guide dog called Yapette, who helps me get around safely and not bump into things I might not see. Yapette has brown fur, a funny red clown nose, floppy ears, and a waggy tail. She wears a white and red spotty guide dog harness. It has a yellow handle that I hold when she guides me. Sometimes I use a white cane to feel my way too. I'm Spin the Rabbit. I have straight red fur and a pale brown face, a straight fringe and tall ears. On the side of my head, I have 2 antennae with yellow circles at the end. I'm Giggle the Cat. I have orange and yellow stripy fur, a pale face, a wavy fringe, and ears shaped like triangles. On my chest, I wear a badge in the shape of a pencil. I use a wheelchair to get around because my legs aren't strong enough for me to walk more than a few steps. My wheelchair is orange and blue with a big yellow star on the wheel, and there's a basket on the back of my seat. I have a cat called Guinea. She's a brown and cream guinea pig. She wears red velvet boots and she helps me out if my wheelchair needs an extra push. Our favourite toy is our magical wooden spoon. It's pale brown. But when it's time to mix up the magic, it lights up. Our magical mixing box has red and yellow wheels and a rope to pull it along. It's painted blue with a yellow star pattern and has a big hole on top for putting things inside. We all live in a round helter-skelter house in Mixington Valley. Mixington Valley has rolling green hills and green bushes. Our house has an upstairs and a downstairs. It's got red and white stripes on the outside, and it has automatic doors for Giggle and her wheelchair. The roof is yellow and there's a wooden spoon on top. There's also a yellow slide which goes from the bedroom down to the garden. To get upstairs, there's a lift. In our garden, we have a twirly cups roundabout to ride on. It has 5 cups that go round and round. There's a lever to turn it on and off too. In the middle is a giant wooden spoon. We also have a garden shed and 2 swings. One of the swings is for a wheelchair, so I can swing too. Up on a hill near our house, there's a cupboard tree. It has cupboards in the tree trunk, a swing hanging from the branches, and a cup on a rope, which goes up and down like a lift. The cupboard tree is where our magical neighbour, the lucky Louverbird, lives. She's shorter than us, even though she's a grown-up. She has grey felt fur and a strange chunky beak and grey wings. Yeah, she looks like an elephant with no ears. She has stick legs and nice red shoes. Oh, and she can blow magic sparkles from her trunky beak. In the sky above Mixington Valley, there are two clouds with faces. They're called moodily clouds. They watch us play. When we're happy, they smile. When we're sad, they have sad faces too. They can also change colour. There are also small creatures called wingles. They're small orange birds that make funny noises. In every Mixed Months episode, we start by playing a game at home. Then we put some toys and sensory items into the magical mixing box. The lucky Louverbird sends her magic sparkles down the valley. They touch the wooden spoon and it lights up. We use the spoon to mix up the magic. We get sucked inside the box into an adventure world and meet the lucky Louverbird. Every adventure is different. Now you know all about the Mixed Month Show. So grab your wooden spoons and come and mix up the magic with us on Milkshake, Channel 5. All 52 episodes of Mixed Months will be audio described for you to enjoy. Because there's always another way. All about.
Oh, do you want to watch it again? So that's the 6-minute intro that we did because we wanted to ensure that all children had full access to the show, and that's housed on YouTube. Okay. Let's get rid of that. Here we go. Has anybody got any questions about the audio description video? It's voiced by the children who are cast as the characters. All the children do have disabilities. They don't match the characters' disabilities, but we thought it was really, really important that we had as many disabled people on cast as possible. And that was quite a challenge as well. People like saying why, and it's like, well, why not? They need to be represented. And these kids, they're brilliant. It's a fantastic cast. I'm just going to whiz through some of the stories, if that's okay. So all of our stories have morals. They all have morals. So we've got a zigzag race here where they can all win a different type of race because we're all good at different things, aren't we? All of the stories have a moral like similar to that. Castle Hunt really embodies the social model of disability where they're all trying to find a house that fits their needs. Beeping Egg Hunt, based on the Beeping Egg Hunt that we have in York, and lots of places do now, which is lovely. But we didn't want the beeping egg to be the solution. So there's a different solution, but we just wanted to showcase the fact that there's lots of ways you can have egg hunts. The lucky Louverbird, as the children said, is their magical neighbour, and it's a very comical role, and it's voiced by a wonderful actor called Gillian, who's also visually impaired. She's brilliant. So just so many voices. As the children said, the moodily clouds are really important as you go through the story because they can reflect the children's emotion, which helps children who don't regulate their emotions well to sort of focus on that. The wingles really are the general public, so sometimes they're really annoying, as we all know. So the wingles can show compassion, they can show ignorance, they can show judgment and acceptance and everything in between. And the magical mixing box is really a symbol for our imagination. As I was saying, behind the scenes, all child actors are voiced by children with disabilities. Our audio describer, Fern, narrator, and Lucky Louverbird are both vision impaired. All the origination team have lived experience of disability, either through themselves or through their children. Obviously, our lead creator, Rebecca, is disabled herself. And the overall design, so children with low vision, we hope will find it easier to manage because it is bright and it does have low visual clutter and slightly slower editing cuts. I also do some training around disabled talent in the industry because we were very keen to encourage as many disabled people to apply for the roles as we can, because we've got some figures here. I sometimes do some work for the Creative Diversity Network, who monitor the media inclusion and representation. So on the screen here, we can see on-screen representation of disability over the past 4 years has only gone up from 7.8% to 8.2%. Off-screen representation, 5.2%. 4 years ago to 6.5%. Disabled people in the, the population is 18%. So we're looking at a low representation here. And it's our job as part of the Creative Diversity Network to increase this. It's slow, but we're trying. Mixed Mops is doing some good in that and trying to get those figures up. I did mention the social and medical model of disability. I don't know if people have heard about those. I was just going to give you a brief overview. I know somebody mentioned about the representation of disabled characters through charity, disabled people through charity. And that's something that we've been on a lot, really, because sometimes it's quite negative. We've found sometimes some charities are doing well, but some charities are still doing bad, and that's because they're stuck in the charity and medical model of disability, which puts the disabled person as the problem, trying to fix them. So I like to call this the medical model of disability, the fix me model of disability. It's all the disabled person's problem and responsibility, and it's really not very helpful. The social model is much more helpful in terms of saying the problem is the disabling world. So I don't need to be fixed, I'm me. But what you need to fix is the barriers around, so the access and more representation will help that as well, because if more disabled people are in the workplace, then they will get things done to reflect their access needs. So the social model of disability is a real positive way forward to show that we can look creatively at solutions, and the solutions is not fixing the disabled person, it's fixing the environment. For example, in Mixington Valley, the home realm is fully accessible for our Mixed Mops, so they can just get on with life, so they don't have all of those issues that we do. And we wanted to do that to give a full social model sort of example of a full and fantastic life. We really want to promote access and representation and influence. We were really lucky that Lucy Edwards, there's a picture of her on the screen. She visited McKinnon and Saunders, which is where Mixed Mops is made, and given us a touch tour. It's the first one of her touch tours is on TikTok. So we hope that that is going to promote that way of doing stuff. And also, obviously, Lucy's got lots of followers as well. And she was really keen to come and promote the access around Mixed Mops. And so it was great. She got to see all the backstages of animation, which is quite interesting. And so we're really lucky to have people like Lucy on board to assist in that. Now, that was a real whistle-stop tour of how representation is both the driving force of Mixed Mops, but also woven into every scene and every decision that we made as a team. Mixed Mops is the show that I was looking for when my son was born. And I hope it shows that the measures needed for programmes and projects and toys to become authentically representative, and the impact that that could have on the self-esteem of our VIPs. Toys, I really hope, got fingers crossed, they'll come along. We need a second series for that, and that's another 5 million. But hey, it's an expensive business as TV. But they will be designed with all the care and the consideration that the programme has. Smells, tactile differentiation, all that sort of stuff. And my top tip, if you want to watch Mixed Mops, Teddy here on the right, who's one of Fred's best friends. Teddy's totally blind. He always watches Mixed Mops with a box, with a hole cut out of, and a wooden spoon. So that's how to watch Mixed Mops. Thank you. I'm sorry I talk so much, but I just wanted to get it all out. I'm going to stop sharing now. Is that stop sharing? Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, for
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Sorry.
you, Karen. That's just to say, before you go on to have a chat with our other panel members, what a brilliant insight. And Sam said earlier, when you shared about kind of your story with Rebecca, thank you, because it is really great for us as parents to hear, kind of how we've all managed and negotiated this whole experience with our children. So thank you. And I'm really looking forward to the next part of the session now.
Well, I hope that's an introduction, and just to show you how it can be done and how important representation is. But I think the most important thing is to talk to people. So we're so lucky that we have today Fern here, Fern Lulham, who we have as our amazing audio describer narrator. Now, I know Fern has got lots of stories to share. And I just think when we met Fern sort of virtually, I was just so excited. It got me. I even looked at training up to be an audio describer, because your passion that you look at and how you describe is just brilliant. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your views and identity as a VIP. I always say VIP. Is that really rude or not? Because I love VIPs.
Fine. Yeah, whatever.
I love my VIPs. And the fact is, I just want you to know about your representation growing up and how that affected you and your development into the wonderful Fern that you are now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, what a lovely introduction. I don't know if I can match up to that, but thank you very much, Karen. Growing up, I had very little representation. I've been thinking back recently to the films or the shows that I used to watch, and I can't think of anything that jumps out at me as being representation at all. And I know you were talking earlier about how your son is sort of not quite ready to step into the visually impaired world, and that was very much me when I was young. I very much rebelled against being different in any way or having to do things differently, and I just kind of felt like I didn't need to, and that worked for me for quite a long time. I kind of wouldn't make a big deal, very much like you were talking about Rebecca, not kind of making a big deal about her disability, just kind of meeting someone and then they get to know you for you. And then at some point they kind of realize, or you eventually tell them, as Rebecca did with you. But quite a lot of the time, for a long time, especially when I was younger, because my sight was a little bit better then, I could get away with more. So it was very much like that story that you told of you and Rebecca, where often people just wouldn't even know. And I was more than happy with that. That was how I wanted it to be, because I think I was very, very scared of people judging me and putting me in a box and just saying, you're the blind girl and I don't relate to you, and maybe I can't be friends with you because you're different to me. I didn't want to be different, and I didn't want to have to do things in a certain way or just hang out with a certain group of people. And I guess it's all of those stories and those meanings that we attach to the core thing, that kind of really make it hard on us, and very much make it hard on our self-esteem, because it's not just I have a visual impairment, this is just a practical thing. Often when we talk about visual impairment, we think about, how do you do certain things if you can't see? But actually, for me, the thing I've always been really interested in is the emotional side of it and the social side of it. And so we're talking about self-esteem. And I just think that when you feel like I don't fit in, maybe I don't matter as much, maybe people think I'm weird, for anyone, you don't have to be disabled to know how that feels. Nobody wants to feel like that. Everyone wants to feel that people can understand them and they can have good relationships with people, they can have lots of friends, people, we all want people to like us. And it can be really, really hard when you fear all of those things, because it does kind of become this secret that you don't want to tell anyone about. And so for a long time, that was how I was. And I just kind of grew up and not really seeing, like I said, not really knowing about anyone with a disability. And I think a lot of people, especially if you go to mainstream school, as a lot of your children may do, you don't often see other people with disabilities, because actually it's quite rare. I didn't have any visually impaired friends when I was young. And again, that can be hard because it makes you, it kind of denormalizes it. It's the opposite of being kind of inclusive and normal and something you don't bat an eyelid at. It's weird and it's rare and it's strange. And that more than ever just makes you go, well, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be, in any way weird, because we're all trying, especially at school, just to not be weird and to be as cool as we possibly can, which, by the way, I was never cool at school. And then as I grew up, and I my sight started to deteriorate, and I had a few different surgeries and operations that kind of made things a little bit worse for me. Actually, it was supposed to make things better, but it kind of went a bit wrong. I started to realize that actually my sight was affecting me, and it was going to be something that I would have to kind of explain to people and somehow tell people about. And a few things happened to me. So I went out into the dating world and I got rejected quite a lot by people, and who knows, like sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe I just didn't have a good experience. I was online dating, which, as we know, is very judgmental. Another thing that happened was that I had this really big debate about, do I or don't I get a guide dog, which I'm sure that, a lot of you have thought about accessibility and canes and guide dogs. And for me, that was a really hard decision to make, because it's so easy to say, well, of course, it's going to help you, get one. But again, when we're talking about this self-esteem piece, it's like that is a huge thing to suddenly put out into the world when you don't want anyone to know, to say, you're going to see this before you see me. You're going to see the dog and you're going to know that I can't see before you've even said hello to me or anything. And so these things started to happen. And then eventually in my 20s, it took me this long to discover audio description. And I think that's why it's so amazing that we're putting audio description into children's shows now, because I didn't even, I didn't really know about it. When I first started to hear about it, I thought, well, that must just be really annoying, just somebody talking all the way through the program, which is, a very common misconception about audio description. When I started using it, only then did I have a real light bulb moment in terms of self-esteem, because for years, I had thought there was something very wrong with me. The fact that I couldn't follow shows like all of my friends could. I would go to sleepovers and everyone would be watching films and I would be sitting there with the cat thinking like, this is really boring. When are we going to do something else? I don't know what's happening. And I thought that must be me. I must be, weird. Like I say, there must be something wrong with me because I'm not enjoying what everyone else is enjoying. And of course, now we know that it was just because I couldn't follow it because I couldn't see the screen. And when I discovered audio description, what I discovered was not only how much I was missing out on, and it became very clear to me why I couldn't follow it, but more than that, in terms of my self-esteem, I discovered that I had been blaming myself and shaming myself for something that I had never had control over and had never been mine to own. And I think all of us at some point have done that. And we all know how that feels, to kind of beat ourselves up for something that actually was never our fault. And it really meant a lot to me when I had that realization. And that's why, Karen, you said that I'm so passionate about audio description, because it had such a huge, profound impact on me. And now I never watch anything without audio description. And it's completely changed the game. And I'm not just saying this as a kind of PR move because I'm an audio describer, but it genuinely, as a visually impaired user of audio description, it's been amazing. And so getting to actually now work in that field and be a narrator myself is just a dream come true, because not only am I using it and enjoying it and getting to feel part of films and TV shows and conversations, more than just being able to watch it, being able to join in when people are having conversations about all of these things. You're always talking about the latest reality TV show or the latest film that's been released or the latest series on Netflix, maybe. And I can join in with that now. And what does that do for me and my self-esteem? So much, I can't even express how much. So yeah, to be part of that and to actually get a role in helping people to discover that and to enjoy that, it just, I can't even put into words what that means to me, both, like I say, as a user and as a professional. It's just been an amazing journey, and I'm so grateful that I've been able to get into this line of work as well now.
You're a real life, there is always another way, isn't there? Because yes. who'd have put a blind audio describer, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Yes, absolutely, we definitely can do. And I love that message from the Mixed Mutts, there's always another way, because that's what I didn't realize when I didn't know about audio description. What I was missing was that, not that I can't do something, but there's just a different way that is going to work for me so much better. And you're absolutely right. When it came to audio describing, people are always like, well, how do you read a script? Because you can't see. And, how do those two things go together? And actually, funnily enough, it's ITV who provide the audio description for Mixed Maps, even though it's on Channel 5. And when I first approached ITV, because I'd done a bit of audio description work for other companies, and I'd always wanted to, like, imagine being able to do Emmerdale or Coronation Street, all those big shows. And I approached them because I'd seen a job advertisement that was advertised as an audio describer role, but you had to be able to write the script and narrate. So you couldn't do one or the other. And I kind of challenged them on that, because to me, it just seemed incredibly ironic that a job that is aimed at helping blind and visually impaired people was not actually inclusive to allow blind and visually impaired people to apply for that job. That just didn't seem right somehow. And so I pointed that out to them in a very, polite, diplomatic way. I just said, I'm just thinking about this. And I proposed to them, can we find another way of doing this? Is there a way that actually can work not just well for me, but actually can work well for the whole team? Because I'm sure there are people on that team who love writing the scripts, but don't particularly like being the voice, the narrator. There are lots of people who would die to be behind a microphone. They don't want to do that bit. But they are very creative people, and they just want to express themselves in a different way in the written word. And so my proposal was, let's let the scripters who are great at that free up their time to do more of that, while I can just do the narration. And I can't write a script at this point. It's not to say that blind and visually impaired people could never write audio description scripts, but of course I can't see a screen well enough to do that. And I think probably the most common way that it could be done is you'd have to have a co-writer. You'd have to have somebody who describes it to you, and then you interpret that and write. But I haven't really got into that area. And so obviously, there's a clear challenge there with me being able to write the script. And so for me, though, to be able to do the narration was, that was such an amazing opportunity to me. And so eventually, after going back and forth, as you do, they said, yes, let's do it. Let's make that happen. And so, and now I'm going to finally address, because I've been keeping you all waiting long enough, the elephant in the room. How do I do it? Basically, how I do it, and it takes a lot of practice, is that I have the script audio, in audio format. So it's read to me, and then I have it in my ear. And then as it's reading, I repeat that script. So I am listening to what's being said, and I'm repeating it at the same time, which definitely takes some doing. It's not easy. It takes a lot of focus and a lot of attention, but it allows me to be able to do what I love. And so I took the time to really get into that. And obviously there's other ways, you could do it Braille. And I'm sure there's various different ways that different blind audio describers do it. But it's just going with that message, Karen, that there is always another way, and you just have to think outside the box. And if you can do that, you're harnessing talent that otherwise would just be completely wasted. And we don't want wasted talent.
No, not when they're as talented as you lot. I mean, it's brilliant. It's so nice. I didn't know the way you did it. So I've learned something today already. So it's great. And also, obviously, you were the ace audio narrator on All the Light We Cannot See. That's had a huge impact, hasn't it, on the VI community and beyond that.
Yes, yeah. And I was so thrilled to be part of that. I mean, I knew from the very beginning, when I was first contacted by IDC to do the audio description for that it was going to be a really big deal in the visually impaired world, because of course, having Aria, the blind leading lady, that was such a big thing. And representation, like you say, Karen, the statistics that we heard there, it's still, it's getting better, but very, very slowly. And for me, I can only imagine, I don't know if any of you actually had this experience, but as a parent, putting on a Netflix series and seeing a blind actress playing the leading lady and doing a phenomenal job, that I can only imagine how emotional that must be, because I, at the moment I'm not a parent, but I one day I would love to be one. And just to have that hope, because I think for so many of us, our biggest fear is the fear of the unknown. What does this mean for my child? I was talking about, the meaning that we attach to things. And I guess a very common experience when you have a visually impaired child, I know from my own parents, was, what is this going to mean for my child? What is this going to mean for their life? What is this going to mean for their, success and their achievements and, everything we dreamed that we wanted for them? And we need that hope. I think representation is, of course, important for people like me who are growing up with a visual impairment and our next generation of visually impaired children. But it is also important for everyone else, parents, very, very much so, but also just the broader community to turn on something and to just go, wow, this person's amazing. And yes, and they also have a disability, and that's not stopping them. And I think at the moment, like I say, it needs to get better, because at the moment it's still like, oh, wow, that's a spectacle that's happening. And we like, it'd be great to get to the point where it's not that, it's like, oh, there's another blind person playing a leading role in a movie. We don't want it to be like the exception to the rule. We want it to become just that's what you see every single day. But I think it is so lovely to get that real life glimpse into what it's really like, because Aria, she talks a lot about how in that film, because she's blind herself, she was able to put things in that were not stereotypes. So she will look at people when she's talking to them, which, a lot of actors who aren't visually impaired but are playing people who are visually impaired will do those stereotypes that you were talking about, Karen. They will think, what can I do that makes it clear that I'm blind, that reminds the audience that I'm blind all the time? And Aria would be quite vocal in saying, no, I wouldn't do that. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that just to play up to the role or the stereotype. And I think we need so much more of that, because when you actually see that, you see yourself or you see your child in a much more realistic way, and everyone else sees the reality of what it is to have a disability rather than this idea. And there's just, I could just talk about all the like we cannot see for ages. There's so much to say about it, but, to be part of that and to be given the responsibility, I always talk about this, but it genuinely meant so much to me as a visually impaired person to be trusted to do the audio description for something that I knew was going to be so important. We're talking about self-esteem, and I want to go back to that for just a second, because I've always struggled with my self-esteem. I'm going to be honest, I have always worried and wanted to try and prove myself to people, and maybe that's why I do so many things, because I'm trying to compensate somehow. But to be able to, for somebody to say, we trust you to do this and we know that you're going to do a good job, for somebody, I think for anyone, I think a lot of you will be sitting here without a disability thinking, yeah, I love it when somebody does that. But particularly when you have a disability, it can mean so much to you, because that is very often not the case. Often you're not trusted. Often people will doubt that you can even do the simplest of things, let alone something, that's really, really got a lot riding on its shoulders. So it meant a lot to me, and I'm so glad that that we can talk about that. And I'm so glad that you have all been able to see that series, and that we are starting slowly to make that headway into representation. And I really do think that it makes a big difference in terms of self-esteem as well.
Oh, it really does, Fern. I'd love to bring Ellie in at this point, if that's okay. We've got the wonderful Ellie Woolwalk here as well, which, I mean, God, what a room we're in today. I would love to know, Ellie, I'd love you to introduce yourself, and I'd love you to sort of talk a little bit about how have you been confident with your identity, and what's helped you in with regards to self-esteem and representation.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Cool. So I'm Ellie Woolwork. I'm 24. I'm a VI actor, and I'm also getting into narrating as well, which is quite funny. I've met Fern before when she was producing for BBC Radio 4 In Touch. So Fern's a massive inspiration to me, and I think it's just absolutely wonderful to hear what you've got to say about everything. I love hearing you speak, and I love just listening to your opinions and things like that.
Well, that's helped my self-esteem, Ellie. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, when I saw that you were going to be on this meeting, I was like, yeah, awesome. So I've had a bit of a journey with my self-esteem. I was born blind, pretty much completely blind. I have retinopathy of prematurity, which basically means that I was born very, very early and my retina's detached. I started using a cane aged 6, had a tiny little cane because I was absolutely tiny as a kid. I was really, really small. And I I was never resistant to using a cane necessarily, but my problems I think stemmed a lot from, like we're saying, with the social model of disability. Society really wore me down. I didn't have a lot of friends in primary school because I didn't have a lot of confidence. I was very angry as a child. I remember experiencing a lot of like just very misdirected anger and feelings of just like real loneliness. A lot of VI kids I know have experienced this as well, where you're very much, if you are the only VI child in your family and you're the only VI child in your school, you don't know anyone else like you and you don't know where to turn for help. And my parents were absolutely fantastic with me, but I was very much like I just didn't know what to do and who I was. When I got into secondary school, I made a lot of sighted friends, and I think that really helped me to feel more confident in myself because I had proof that people accepted me, and I had proof that I was able to live in the world and that that was okay. And making VI friends also really helped with that because, again, I met people like me who were blind or VI and actually, like, again, lived in the world, and that was okay as well. I think I definitely struggled with my self-esteem, and to be honest, I still do struggle. I think especially with mental health, it's difficult to say like I am totally fine now because a lot of the time that's not necessarily true. But I definitely think that making friends and having positive influences and really growing as a person definitely helped me.
And that's great to hear, Elliot. And you've come, God, what a journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's really weird to think like looking back on how I was as a kid, to now, like it's an absolute world away. And I'm just, sometimes I just want to give my younger self a hug and be like, it's okay, like it turns out all right, don't worry. But I really do think that like interactions with other children really have an effect. I mean, Fern, when you were talking about the audio description thing, I used to watch films with my friends in like from school or like my home friends, and I just used to like sit there and be like, what is going on? I don't understand what's going on. And it made me so angry. I was like, why am I here? What am I doing? And I just felt so out of place in the world. And it took years for me to be able to feel a lot more okay. And like I think it's very important to remember that we struggle and that it's okay to say that. Like not everyone has a smooth journey. Not everyone can say, I grew up absolutely fine and everything was absolutely brilliant. And I'm for those people who have, I'm so glad for them because like we want more of that in the world. But especially now, and especially like when mental health is so talked about now and it's much more accepted to talk about how you're feeling, I think with disability, like people need to understand that disabled children can also be unhappy, and it's not necessarily just because of their disability. It can also be a whole multitude of different things, and supporting a disabled kid throughout their childhood and making sure that they're supported in every way that they possibly can be, that is what helps.
No, I can really see that. So developing that positive identity as a woman, as a man, as a whole woman, not just as a blind. Yeah, I can really see that.
Like as a blind person as well, like I mean I had so many things going on, like when I came out at 14 I just sort of thought, oh no, here's another facet of my identity, what now? Like some people just sort of said, well, you're blind, what do you mean you're also LGBTQ plus? Like it was kind of an absolute shocker that you could be more than one thing. And that when you're supporting your children through growing up, like supporting them in every part of their identity is so important, not just the disability.
Yeah, that intersectionality is quite interesting.
Exactly.
And it's hard to find it in the media. Have you found some positive representation?
Blindness, yes. I things we've been talking about recently, like All the Light We Cannot See, absolutely sobbed when I watched that. I was like, oh god, it made me feel so many things, and like absolutely loved it. But with intersectional blind rep, not too much, to be honest. And that's what I want to see now. I want to see going forward. I want to see stories about blind queer kids and adults. I want to see stories about blind people of color. I want to see like so many stories that we all deserve to see, not just for ourselves, but for other people.
Definitely. No, it's fantastic. Jane, sorry, I seen your hand up and I didn't want to.
I was just going to say that my daughter Chloe, Ellie was telling me this week about, I think it's a YouTube couple that she follows who they're two gay men, and one of the partners got retinitis pigmentosa, and they talk about all the funny things and they take the mickey, and she said, I really
what
like
are they
it, Mum.
called?
I don't know, but I'll find out.
I would love to know what they're called, because that just honestly fills my heart with just so much joy, because
they're on Instagram
I just love it.
as well. I'm sure I've seen them on Instagram.
If you find out who they are, can someone please tell me, because I would love to watch that.
Yeah, and one of the things we're going to do as part of this is create a list of influencers, kind of books. Karen's obviously sent me a brilliant list of books where there's positive representation of all different kinds of disabilities. But I just wanted to add that before I forget, and we will make sure that you get it as well, Ellie.
That is so lovely. Okay, good.
It's great to have resources, isn't it? It's about sharing, isn't it?
Exactly.
What I want to do also is to, we've got Grant, who's been really waiting patiently there in top right of my screen. Grant, thank you so much for coming. You're one of our Ace Look mentors, aren't you? As well as lots of other things.
Yes, I'm a mentor. A new mentor. I just joined Look this year. So I've recently got my first mentee a couple of months ago, which is nice. Charlotte, someone who has worked for Look, sent me a message earlier saying she's got me a second one as well. So that'll be interesting and cool to see what's going to be.
Oh, that's fantastic. Tell us a bit about yourself, Grant. Just being
so
nosy.
yeah, so I've got what's been mentioned quite a lot tonight, retinitis pigmentosa as well. So I grew up through school and stuff, all mainstream school, very in denial, I think, about my condition. Strangely, so I have it in my family. I have a cousin, an auntie, and my granddad who all have it. But even though you'd think, okay, it must be, good representation in there, it was never really talked about, which is very strange. Me and my cousin, we're only a couple of years different in age. We've had many conversations now that we're adults about how it was weird. Our family wouldn't talk about it. We sort of grew up acting like the eye condition wasn't there, which, it wasn't very helpful. So I've grew through school like I was sighted. Again, how Ellie said earlier, I grew up a very angry kid, I think, watching my peers do things I couldn't. I was always a very sporty child, but when I was playing with my friends, be it football and tennis and basketball and everything like that, when I was quite good, when I was like, say 8 years old, I'd watch all my friends get better and better as they were growing up, where I was sort of going the opposite way. I was, getting worse, I couldn't see as much, and I didn't really understand what was happening. So sort of eventually stopped playing sport when I was sort of 15, 16. It was just too difficult. I was getting too angry, getting too frustrated, things like that. I then went to university, got a degree, did all that stuff, and moved to Manchester briefly a few years ago. So when I moved there, sort of didn't have any friends, didn't know anyone there. So that's when I was like, okay, let's start sort of taking this seriously, I suppose. So Google sort of blind and visually impaired sports in the area. That's when I started playing goalball. It's a blind sport. I started playing blind baseball, all these other wonderful things. And that's, I suppose, when the joy for sport came back to my life, and the realisation of the eye condition doesn't matter, and still do anything that you want to do. I've since moved back to the northeast where I was born, where I live, and I play all that up here. I've helped sort of set some clubs up here. I'm on the committee for the goalball club in Newcastle and things like that. So that's sort of my way of it. There's a comedian, if anyone listens to comedy in the call, called Josh Pugh. He's from the Midlands, and I love comedy as well. And I never knew this guy was visually impaired until I was listening to a podcast he was on, where he mentioned it, and he plays for the visually impaired English football team and all this. Which again, when we're talking about representation, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, I've watched your comedy and I didn't even know that was a thing. And then I've been to see him twice now live. In his most recent show, it was sort of based on his eyesight, where he doesn't sort of reveal it until the end. He sort of does it in little stories, not mentioning his eyes, but how he's not very manly, and he doesn't do DIY, and he gets his father-in-law to do it for him, things like this. And then he all links it back at the end to, it's not because I'm not manly, it's because I can't do DIY, like my eyes don't allow me. And sort of rounds it all off quite deeply. But sort of seeing things like that, which is just like resonates with you so much, because it's like, I can't do DIY, I'm useless. But it's not because I'm useless, I just can't see the bloody nail to hammer into the wall and things like that. So that's sort of what I get up to, I suppose.
Then that's brilliant. Thank you so much for letting us into your life a bit. I mean, what would you say the top tips were that you would sort of talk to us about, you know, your life and share your experience with the parents here today?
So I mean, I really appreciate the way my family grew me up and brought me up, because they did leave me to it, which was amazing in terms of I'm very, you know, self-sufficient, and I won't let anyone do anything for me, even sometimes when I should be, you know, taking a step back and I'm getting offers and I don't take them. But that's the way, you know, I was shoved into everything, where, you know, I do have some blind, visually impaired friends in the sporting world and things like that who you can see have had everything done for them, which is a little bit frustrating. But one thing I really wish was pushed upon me was, I suppose, earlier in life, was to join clubs which like visually impaired sports. Obviously, not everyone's into sports, will be that a visually impaired book club or visually impaired musical theatre, whatever, you know, your child's interested in. Being around like-minded people who have a disability the same as yourself is just really refreshing. Even though all of our conditions are different and we can all see complete different levels, and you know, I can't see in the dark and someone can't see in bright lights and all of this, you sort of just feel at home, I think, with each other, and you become a lot more comfortable. Same when we talk about the cane. I never had a cane until only, say, 2 or 3 years ago. It's something I should have had in the dark since I was probably 5, 6 years old, because I've got complete night blindness when, you know, I can't see my hand in front of my face. But I was sort of in the dark. I'd walk around with a torch, I'd walk around grabbing onto someone and doing all these things which I shouldn't have been doing. I should have just had a cane, but it was never pushed upon me. But being around all these friends I've made now in the last few years playing sport, and seeing how, you know, they've got better vision than I do, and they're using a guide dog or they're using a cane, it's like sort of brings that confidence out in you to, you know, you don't need to be worried, you shouldn't be ashamed, because they're amazing to do it, so why shouldn't you be?
That's amazing. There's so many different ways, isn't there? And I think it's important for us to realise that there's lots of different solutions, isn't there? I know we've got, can I ask also Ellie and Fern about their top tips as well? That would be great to hear. And then we've got some questions for some parents that I might need Jane's help with a little, if that's
Which one of us
right.
should go first?
You go first, Ellie.
Alrighty, I will. God, my top tips. I had loads of ideas earlier and it's all gone out my head. I definitely say, like, as Grant said, introduce kids to VI kids early on, as early as possible. Like, I think you don't have, your kids don't necessarily have to be best friends with the VI kids that they know. I think that's kind of unrealistic sometimes, because, I mean, when I was little, I didn't want to be friends with any blind people. I was like, no, like, they're all losers, and that's completely wrong. I had so much internalized ableism. But like, I really do think it's important to at least introduce your kids to other disabled kids, and not just VI children either. I think it's very important that you introduce kids to other disabled people, so whether that's wheelchair users or kids with autism or just any disabled children, because like, the VI experience isn't the only experience of disability, and the earlier kids learn that and learn sort of that other disabled experiences sort of also exist, because you never know, your child might grow up and develop another disability, and the sooner they learn that there are other disabled kids thriving, the better. What else? Oh, that was sort of my main one, but I also just, I guess, like, treat disability as a part of life, because obviously a lot of the time disability does suck. Being blind sucks sometimes, and unfortunately that is a sad reality of it. Your kid might come home from school one day and be sad because their friends, like, they couldn't see from across the playground. That happened to me a lot, where I just sat on a bench and didn't know where my friends were, and it really helped that my parents were very validating of my experiences, but also the fact that they didn't sort of treat it like, oh, how terrible, what a shame, because I do understand where that feeling might come from. But for your children, disability and blindness and visual impairment is just going to be a part of their life, and to treat it as normally, in quotation marks, as possible is just going to help them so much when they grow up and gain as much confidence as they can do.
I love that. I love that. Sometimes life sucks. It does.
Yeah,
doesn't it? And I
it
think that-
does. Like you've got to embrace it as much as you possibly can.
and that resilience that you get from that obviously is pushed, you know, all you want to do amazing things. It's just, it's so good to hear as a parent.
Oh, I've got another quick one.
Oh, go on, go for
as
it.
well. I think so. When I was growing up and I realized I wanted to be an actor, I got kind of a lot of like, oh, you couldn't possibly do that. I got very much of a blind people should be lawyers or judges or barristers, or you should go into, I don't know, piano tuning or something. And like, absolutely no shade to any VI people who do those jobs, but that was not for me. And I just thought, I don't want to be that. I want to be A, me, and B, I want to do something that feels right. And all throughout when I was at uni and I realized I didn't like uni, I had a lot of things of, well, you know, but you're so successful as a blind person, you need to just carry on. And I just thought, well, no, because like I don't want to be thought of as a successful blind person that overcomes their disability. Like my disability is part of who I am.
Yeah.
And when I started doing acting a lot more full time, it really helped me to feel a lot more confident in myself, because I was thinking, well, hey, like I'm chasing what I want to do, and I don't want to be a stereotype of myself. I just want to be myself, whatever that ends up meaning to me. And I don't have to be the perfect blind person or what everyone thinks a blind person should do, because I don't think that's realistic.
No, that's fantastic. And you're really blasting the stereotypes. They shouldn't be there, but they are. And
Yeah, exactly.
It's recognizing that, isn't it?
Mm.
Fern, how about you and your top tips?
Yeah, I love what Ellie said about acknowledging the hard stuff, because I think when I was young, I was very much told, you're no different to everyone else. You know, you can do everything that everyone else can do. And it is such a fine line. You know, don't get me wrong, I don't envy anyone to have to try and strike that balance between, you know, acknowledging that of course there is some difference, but equally, like you said, Ellie, not then going to the opposite side of the spectrum and saying, oh, you know, your life's going to be terrible, you can't do anything, you know, and wrapping them up in cotton wool, which I know is also very, very tempting. I think the thing to remember is, to go back to the mixed maps message, that it's about how you do stuff. So it's not about saying you can do everything or you can't do anything. It's about saying there are going to be some things that you might find a bit difficult. And going back to what my difficulties with the watching TV thing, I think maybe what would have helped is that if my parents had sort of said, if you come up against something that you find difficult or you don't really understand why you can't join in like other people can, let's just have a chat about that. Because do you know what? Actually, everyone, disabled or not, has struggles. And sometimes we can't all do things the same way. Even if, you know, say you haven't got a disability, two people might do things completely different ways. And I think there is something about knowing when to be able to be independent and, you know, as Grant said, sort of work it out yourself, but also knowing that actually asking for help is okay. And if you can work through things together, like the mixed mups do, working as a team, you can find the way that works for you. And that way is not any better or worse. There's no shame in that. It's just the way that works for you. I also think that for me, something that's really helped me, and I kind of wish I'd figured this out earlier, or somebody had kind of taught me how to do this earlier, but asking the children themselves what they need. And of course, this is very age dependent. You know, sometimes if you're a very young child, you don't always know what you need, but letting the children lead the way, because very often I think as parents and as caregivers, we want to, you know, as I said, wrap them up in cotton wool, but also kind of provide them with all the answers. And like Grant touched upon, I don't think that's always the best way, because then you become very dependent and reliant on somebody else to make all the decisions for you. And so actually, if your child comes to you and they have, you know, they're upset about something, just having that conversation and saying like, what do you think would make this better? Or what do you need right now? What might help you to be able to get them to start? And they might not always know the answer, or they might not know straight away, or they might come to you the day after and go, actually, I've been thinking about it and maybe this would be good. And then you can have that two-way conversation. I think that is such a healthy thing to be able to do. And just the last thing that I'll throw in here is to acknowledge that it's a journey. Self-esteem and confidence and sight loss and all of those things, we all know, is not something that's like you reach an end goal and then you are forever confident, or you never care about your sight loss anymore, or and even as parents, you're never going to get to the point where you go, I'm not at all fazed by the fact that my child has a disability. You're going to have days when it sucks, like Ellie said. You're going to have days when it's rubbish and you hate it and you wish that you could change that. And not shaming ourselves for those days, because the worst thing we do is feel bad and then make ourselves feel worse because we feel bad. And I think as parents, I know that that's something that a lot of you will be able to relate to, is saying, I feel bad about the fact that my child has a disability, but I shouldn't feel bad about that. How dare I? Because who am I to feel like that? That is so painful. And so actually just to be able to say, I'm going to have days where I feel bad, and that might be triggered by anything at any time, and that is so human and so normal, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to feel like this forever. It just means that right now I feel like that, and that's okay.
Also, we're not all superheroes, and no one's a superhero. We can't be
No.
okay all the time, right? Like, you have to have days where you feel rubbish, and that goes for parents and kids as well. I love what you said about that, Fern. I thought that was great.
Thank you.
They're such refreshing words, and they're so useful. And the superhero thing, I know, is that thing. And whenever they try to do media representation, you've either got super special skills because you're blind.
Oh, yes.
It's not helpful sometimes, is it?
I wish we did.
Same. I wish, like, the blind fortune teller, I'd love to be that. That would be so good.
You have to write yourself. No, they're such wise words. And I'm going to open out now, if I can, for the last 10 minutes to the audience. If anybody, I've got quite a few questions here, but I'm just looking through, and I think a lot of them may have been answered in the sort of our sort of conversations. But can I ask if you've got any specific questions? While we've got Grant, Fern and Ellie and the whole community here, could you unmute yourself or ask in the chat?
Karen, I'm just going to, while people are thinking, give Fern some feedback. So Fern, one of our people on the call said, Fern, great to hear your journey to being an audio describer. I have a VI and would have had that as a job career that would have been tricky. Think it's so important now to find out rather than closing doors. So I think she's saying that it could have been an option, but she just thought it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for speaking. So it's just, really good. And I was going to say to Grant, my husband is severely sight impaired. And do you know what? He's really good at DIY, but it took him a long time and he had to work it all out. And he sits there with his magnifier and, finding all his VI life hacks. So, yeah, it's just his thing, his problem solver thing.
Don't be telling our family that. They'll start making me do it. I'm quite happy to sit there and get other people doing that part.
I learned how to bleed a radiator recently and repressurize the boiler, and I felt so good about myself.
You are a superhero.
Honestly, it's hard. Like, you have to just get someone to show you how to do it. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Teach your kids how to do those kinds of things at some point, because I don't want to have to learn by myself. It can be really hard, but yeah, it's an important thing to learn.
I moved into my own place last year, and I did try and do painting. It quickly got painted over because it was the most patchiest thing ever, apparently. But
oh no, that would be
in my eyes, it looked lovely and white. But
yeah,
apparently not.
So we can't there has been lots of questions, and I just wondered if any of you would like to reflect. There's a few who've got children who are younger, who have got peers not being very nice to them. There's a couple of questions that are quite similar. Someone's written in and said, what early interventions do you recommend for primary aged severely sight impaired children to boost their self-esteem and help them feel positive about their differences? Our child is 6.5 years old and really already trying to pretend they haven't got a VI and wanting to be the same as their peers, despite us talking openly and positively. I feel the issue is other people's influence and negative language used outside of the home. I mean, I can understand that. When my daughter was really little, she had a cane from about 3, and I could just hear old ladies going, oh, what a shame. In front of her, she was like, and you're like, well, what are you meant to do with that? So
I think, yeah, I've got a thing to chime in on that. So you can't change what other people think, and maybe sometimes how other people express, like especially with young children. I remember I had a lot of things. Something that will always stick in my mind is that when I was about 8, I had this it was Easter, and I went into school with this Easter bonnet on that apparently, according to lots of the other children, looked ridiculous. And I didn't know that they were like bullying me. I didn't have a lot of social understanding of what was going on, but apparently they were saying some horrible stuff about me, and my parents overheard. And apparently my grandma marched into the school the next day and just shouted at like teachers and stuff. And I don't necessarily think that was the best way to do it, but it kind of taught me a lot of stuff about like the fact that people care. So when the people are saying just this stuff to your child, a lot of the time, if you show them that you care about them and that you understand and that you're listening to them, that can have an effect. I don't have solutions about like what to do in terms of, it might be worth speaking to teachers if your child's getting bullied, things like that. But if you show your child that you're there for them and really sort of make sure that you're listening to them and talking to them about how they're feeling, that's something that they will remember, and that's something that will stick with them in a really good way.
Thank you. And this is very specific, but there's also someone who said that her 18-year-old daughter needs confidence building, going out and about as a young adult with a hidden disability, when people speak to her companion instead of her. So yeah.
Can I just add one thing on the last one? Sorry.
Yes.
I would say as well about maybe your child's not doing this for this purpose, but even I'll do this now where I'll pretend I can see things people are talking about, just because sometimes it's very tiring. 24 hours of a day going, sorry, I can't see that. Can you explain? Sorry, can you point where it actually is? Sometimes you're just like, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, cool. It just shuts the conversation down. Like sometimes you're just like, a lot of the times I'm very inquisitive and I want to know everything and I'm very nosy. But sometimes I'm just like, I'm really tired. I'm just going to pretend I can see it and we can move on to a different conversation.
I feel that so much.
It might not even be like, oh yeah, I'm pretending because I'm sort of ashamed of it. It's just like, I'm really be bothered. So
it's
yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
In terms of the companion thing, something I've started doing recently is just very loudly talking at the person who's talking to the companion, and just saying like, I was at a train station and someone was doing this to me, to talking to my friend. So I stepped like up to the counter and said like very loudly, yes, I am going to insert station name here. Like and it takes a lot of confidence to do that, and it took me a while to even like realize that I should do it. But that's a really good way to like actually get to grips with it, by actually inserting yourself into that conversation rather than letting them speak to your companion. But that is quite hard to do. It's not easy to do that.
Yeah, and also say from the parents' perspective, just quite simply asking whoever it is, be that the a waiter, a shop worker, a taxi driver, just asking them to ask them themselves instead of going, or it's like, I was with my mum and they're like, oh Debbie, what does he want? I'm just like, my mum just got asking me yourself. Like, we have ears, we have mouths. Our eyes might not work, but there's no reason that it shouldn't be asking us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess that in that way we can model what we, so when our children are older, they can do the same. Ask me. Yes, not other people. Has anyone, we've got actually it's almost 9 o'clock, but Karen, I wondered if you had any top tips, because you started this meeting off so well. It's lovely to hear your story and to hear about Mix Mups, and we will all spread the word because it's so important. But have you got anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would always say just keep the conversation going, whatever it is. I think, I love the talk about the journeys. I love the talk, and I think being around as many different types of people is the best thing. We've made sure that we've got lots of VI friends, lots of disabled friends, lots of funny friends, lots of, it's just being around lots of different people and trying those experiences out. And there is always another way, there really is. The lucky Luther bird has got it licked in her catchphrase. So just try it and reach out. The VI community is one of the most, I feel so lucky to have found it. And just reach out because we're there.
Brilliant. problem solving, no, not superpowers, but absolutely the ability to problem solve, because and that is key life skills. So I just want to thank you all so much. It's been so fascinating. We could have had another hour probably, but you're all so insightful, really helpful. Thank you, Karen, for being our superb chat show host, and for Fern, Ellie and Grant for your inputs. It's been brilliant. So everybody, when you log off, if you can, spend a few minutes just kind of feeding back for us about how you found the session. Our next event actually for parents is another panel event. In 2 weeks' time, May the 13th, we've got a panel event on moving through for mental health, in line with Mental Health Awareness Week. But it's about what to do when you feel that overwhelm as a parent, fighting for the services for your children. And so please log on. It'd be great to have you there. So I'm going to ask the panel to stay on, but everyone else, thank you for coming and listening to us this evening, and we hope you have a good night.